My name is Clara James, 28 years old. The impact didn't sound like metal. It sounded like the world coughing up light. 1 second I was driving home from a late shoot, the road a ribbon of wet black. The next I was upside down, harnessed to gravity by a seatbelt that bit into my collarbone. The oak I hadn't seen in time pushed into the engine like a fist. Airbag powder stung my nose. The radio turned into static and breath. I tasted blood, copper, and adrenaline. I could wiggle my fingers. I could count them. That meant I was alive. I blinked. The windshield starred, glittering with what looked like sugar under the street lamp. The steering wheel pressed the bones of my thigh. Pain bloomed, hot and dizzy. Outside, somewhere far and then near, a siren unspooled. Footsteps on broken glass. "Is she breathing?" my mother asked, her voice thin and far as if she were calling from the other end of a hallway. "Yeah," my brother Ethan answered, too quickly. "But she's out cold. Paramedics are 5 minutes out." Something in the way he said it, brisk, efficient, made the hairs on my arms rise. Not relief, something else. Calculation. "Jesus Christ," Dad muttered, not even trying to hide the irritation. "This is all we need right now." All they needed. I was upside down in a car, my hair snagged in the headliner, my heart pounding against a bruise that hadn't formed yet, and I was an inconvenience. I let my eyelids slacken into a pose. The neck brace they'd give me later would hide the clench of my jaw. I can be still, I thought. For once, I can be very, very still. Glass crunched again. "At least she can't ruin the wedding now," my sister Brittany said, her voice pitched low, like a secret. The wedding. Cousin Rachel's next weekend, where I was supposed to stand at her left hand, where I had planned to announce my engagement to Derek in a way that would turn this family into witnesses for once instead of judges. Emerald ring lights from oncoming traffic smeared across the ruined hood. The idea of that moment felt suddenly naive, like a paper swan in rain. "Don't be cruel," Mom whispered, but I'd grown up on the difference between disapproval and enforcement. There was no backbone in her correction. "I'm just saying what we're all thinking," Brittany continued. "She's been impossible lately. All that drama about Derek acting like she's too good for our traditions." My heart thudded once, loud, and I worried it would betray me to the people who had taught it to sprint. Derek and I had been together 3 years. We'd gotten engaged 2 months ago, and kept it a secret not because secrets felt romantic, but because my family treated him like thrift store lace. Pretty, but not good. "He teaches English," they said with eyebrows. "He works at a public school," they said with sighs. "He knows the names of my favorite mentors and the way I take my coffee, but that would never count in a house where love has to be embossed." "The girl's always been selfish," Dad said. "Everything has to be about her. Remember her high school graduation?" He didn't say it like a question. He said it like a case. "That fit she threw about wanting to go to art school instead of business. Cost us a fortune in therapy." The therapy hadn't been the punishment. The punishment had been the way the air in our house changed color after I asked if my life could look different. The therapy was so I could talk to someone who didn't think lightrooms were hobbies and cameras were childish. Sirens deepened, closer now, blue on bark and asphalt. My mother's heels clicked around to the passenger side. "We tell everyone she was distracted on her phone," Dad said. "Urgent now. The project manager in a crisis. We can't have this on the insurance." I wanted to laugh, except blood pooled behind my molars. I hadn't been on my phone. I had swerved to miss a deer that blinked into the reverse of my headlights and then was gone. I had dialed Derek 20 minutes earlier, off the highway, told him about the couple I'd photographed, who'd brought their dog into the studio and how the dog had behaved better than the husband. I had sung along to the radio, cracked and happy. I had been complicated and alive. "Should we call Derek?" Mom asked in a voice that suggested she hoped the answer was no. "Let's wait," Ethan said. "No point worrying him if she's fine." If I was fine. If I was a docket item, they could move to another meeting. The paramedics' voices were a knife through the family whispering. Professional. Practiced. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" a woman asked, warm, steady. I didn't answer. She touched my wrist, her fingers locating a pulse that wasn't performing for anyone. "We're going to stabilize your neck and get you out, okay?" Something in me wanted to nod, to say please, but I kept still. I needed to know if I had invented the way they looked at me. I needed to know if the stories my body told me about my own people were true. While they cut the belt and slid the board behind me, Dad was talking to a police officer like an actor with good projections. "She's been under a lot of stress," he said. "Work troubles, relationship issues. We've been worried about her mental state." Lies. Neat ones. I had gotten a promotion 3 weeks ago. My gallery had finally broken even. The only thing wrong with my mental state had been the way it withered after Sunday dinners. They loaded me into the ambulance. The doors closed. Between the hum of the engine and the squeak of the wheels, I heard my mother's voice again. "Yes, there's been an accident. We don't know how serious. Can you postpone the cake tasting until next week?" Cake. Layers and layers of sugar on a foundation of flour and eggs. Structures you can cut. Fluorescence turned the ER into a different kind of forest, white and humming. They wheeled me down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and thyme. "Any family history we should know about?" a doctor asked over me. "Depression," Dad said immediately, as if he had practiced the timing. "She's been struggling. This might have been intentional." Intentional. The word moved through my chest like a cat with its back up. "Any previous attempts?" the doctor asked, and Mom said carefully, "Nothing overt, but she's been making statements about not fitting, feeling like she doesn't belong." I had said I felt invisible. I had said I wanted to stop auditioning. I had said 1,000 things that didn't sound like this. Hearing them recited in a hospital made me feel like I had turned into case notes. "We'll keep her for observation and have psychiatry evaluate when she wakes," the doctor said, making a mark with a pen that seemed to weigh a lot. They moved me into a room that belonged to everyone but me. Monitors beeped. My blood pressure performed the trick it had learned. Stay inside the box, and no one will yell. Familiar shoes gathered. My grandmother's sensible flats. My uncle's sneakers. Cousin's heels clicking and then stopping just inside the threshold like guilt. "She's always been difficult, Grandma." Dad's mother, not Patricia's mother, said, the word difficult worn smooth from use. Never satisfied. "Remember Cousin Marie's wedding?" my uncle offered. The pink cupcake dress. I remembered. 12, sticky with embarrassment. Girls laughing while I wore the dress that didn't fit, that felt like a costume I hadn't needed an audition for. "And that boyfriend," Grandma continued, "Derek, he's not our kind of people. He was the kind who packs a lunch so he can afford to buy books for his classroom. He was the kind who says, 'I'm proud of you,' like he's talking about the sky. Not their kind then." "Maybe this is a wake-up call," an aunt suggested. "A chance to rethink." "Maybe it's a sign," Brittany said, and in the quiet between machine beeps, I heard the smile in it. Maybe she isn't meant to be part of our future. Footsteps in the hallway. Quick, reverent, trying to be respectful of speed limits imposed by Tile. "I'm her fiancé," Derek told a nurse. "I got here as soon as I could. How is she?" He said fiancé like a vow, not like a brand. The nurse gave him my room number. He got heavier as he got closer. In the doorway, my mother's voice cooled. "Mr. Patterson." "How is she?" he asked, already at my side, already knowing that if he said my name too loud, I would wake up even if I were dead. "Unconscious, but stable," Dad said. "The doctors are running tests." "What happened?" Derek asked. The message said she was distracted. "Probably texting," Ethan cut in. "You know how she is." He knew how I was. He had taught me where to put my hands on the steering wheel when it rained. He had installed the phone mount and told me not to look at it. He had made up games to keep me from checking texts. He looked at my phone less than my family did, and he had read more of my life. "That doesn't sound like her," he said, and his voice went quiet in the way rivers go quiet before a dam breaks. "You'd be surprised what you don't know," Brittany murmured. Dad cleared his throat, businessman of the heart. "Given the circumstances," he said, "maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding. It might be awkward." For a beat, I thought the machines had stopped. Then I heard them again because Derek's voice found the pitch that made everything else sound like lying. "So my fiancé is in a hospital bed," he said, "and you're worried about wedding etiquette." "Fiancé?" Grandma repeated, as if the syllables were cayenne. "She accepted my proposal 2 months ago," Derek said. "We were planning to tell everyone." "She never mentioned an engagement," Mom said, and her voice held a crack that sounded almost like a person. "Because she was afraid of exactly this," he said. He inhaled like a man setting down a box that wasn't his to carry. "For 3 years, I've watched you reduce her to performances. She gets promoted. You ask why she isn't running the place yet. She volunteers. You ask why she isn't networking. She drives 6 hours to see you. You hand her a chore list. She sends flowers. You critique the arrangement." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. It peeled the paint off the story they had told themselves. We want what's best for her, Mom said, but the phrase sounded exhausted. It had been overworked. No, he said. You want what's best for you. Silence has textures. This one was wet. A nurse entered, apologized, checked the chart, said politely that visiting hours would end soon, that only immediate family could stay. I'm her fiancé, Derek said. I'm sorry, sir, the nurse said gently. Hospital policy, spouses and blood relatives. He can go, Dad said quickly. We'll stay. Actually, Derek said, and the word was a hinge, I think she'd want her best friend here. I just texted Melanie. She's on her way. Outsiders aren't necessary, Mom said. Anyone who treats her like a person instead of a brand is not an outsider, he replied, and the monitor next to me beeped, as if applauding. I lay there and let their words arrange themselves into a structure I could name. They were rewriting me for the doctor, for the police, for the nurse with the careful hands. They were calling chaos care. They were calling control love. Dr. Martinez came in with a clipboard and good news. No serious brain injury, concussion, bruises that would bloom. We'll keep her overnight and have psychiatry evaluate, he added, a sentence I could feel Dad relax under like a weighted blanket. Psychiatry? Derek asked, and you could hear him pick the word up by its corners. Why? Family mentioned depression, the doctor said. Family lied, he said. The room held its breath. Mine did too. Let me speak with the patient when she wakes, the doctor said. She can tell us. When he left, they started again. They couldn't help themselves. People who live on scaffolding can't stop building. This is a disaster, Dad muttered. If word gets out about the engagement, we can't let her marry him, Grandma said. It would be a catastrophe for the family. Maybe the accident is a blessing, Brittany said. We can use it. How? Mom asked. And the word did not sound like a mother. She's vulnerable, Brittany said. We can convince her he abandoned her. Or pay him to leave, Grandma offered. Make it look like his idea. My blood ran cold. Foam formed at the edge of my hearing. They were gaming me like a market. We need to be subtle, Dad said. We tell everyone she was texting. By the time she says otherwise, the story will be established. Pretending to be asleep takes energy I didn't know I had. I lay there and let them decide who I should be. The monitor beeped my pulse into a record. A choice started to form in the space behind my breastbone. I could open my eyes and become a hurricane in fluorescent light, or I could wait and collect every drop of weather. In the hallway, a familiar sound, heels I knew as well as my own exhale. Oh my God, Melanie said from the doorway, breathless and here. Is she okay? She's stable, Mom said coolly. What happened? Melanie asked. Derek's text was brief. Distracted driving, Dad said. You know how she is. That's impossible, Melanie said immediately. She doesn't touch her phone in the car. She lectures strangers about it. She knew me. She always had. I kept my eyes closed. I let the truth pile up until it could hold my weight. I wasn't ready to stand yet, but I would be. Soon. For now, I stayed still and learned. Melanie's voice cut through the sterile air like a rescue flare. Distracted driving, she repeated, disbelief curdling into anger. She doesn't even let me text when I'm in the passenger seat. You really expect anyone to believe that? Mom's tone stayed syrupy. Sweetheart, you weren't there. You don't know how stressed she's been. Stressed? Melanie said. From what? She just got promoted, she's engaged, and she's finally happy. That's not stress. That's finally breathing. Dad stepped closer to her like he was managing a difficult client. We appreciate your concern, but this is a family matter. Yeah, Melanie said. That's the problem. I could almost picture the look on her face, the one that had gotten her through law school interviews and every argument with her ex. Chin tilted, one eyebrow raised, just enough to make you realize you were the one on trial. You've always been dramatic, Melanie, Grandma said. We're just trying to keep things private. Private? Melanie's laugh was small and sharp. You mean controllable. I've seen how this family treats her, like she's a walking disappointment wearing the wrong shoes. Excuse me? Dad said, a note of warning under his politeness. Melanie didn't flinch. She's told me what it's like here, how every accomplishment becomes an insult, how she has to edit herself so she doesn't upset the family brand. You don't want privacy, you want silence. For a second, no one spoke. The heart monitor next to me filled the pause with its patient beeping. She's confused, Mom said finally. Clara tells stories when she feels... When she feels what? Melanie snapped. Unloved? Unseen? Maybe she tells stories because no one here listens. Dad exhaled loudly, the sound of someone remembering he's supposed to look calm. This isn't the time or place. That's what people say when they're scared of being exposed, Melanie said. When exactly is the time to talk about how you're rewriting her life while she's lying in a hospital bed? I wanted to open my eyes right then, to tell her thank you, to tell her to run before they turned their knives on her too. But I stayed still. Every word she threw was a lifeline. Footsteps again, slower this time. A door opening, then a voice that always found the right volume. Derek. He'd come back. I brought coffee, he said softly, his voice full of apology and exhaustion. Thought everyone could use some. Even after everything they'd said about him, he was still offering them kindness. Thank you, Melanie said, her tone softening for him. That's thoughtful. It's the least I can do, he replied. I know this is hard for everyone. Hard? Dad repeated, seizing the opening. You have no idea how hard this is for us. Watching her destroy herself with bad decisions. Bad decisions? Derek's calm cracked just enough for the edge of anger to show. You mean falling in love with someone who doesn't meet your financial criteria? Dad's jaw tightened. We're concerned about her future. Her future? Derek said. She has one. She built it herself. You just don't like that it doesn't include your approval process. Grandma's voice joined in, brittle as glass. Love is nice when you're young, but it doesn't pay medical bills. It doesn't secure a good life. And yet, Derek said, setting his cup down carefully, it's the only thing she's ever asked for. To be loved, not audited. Mom sighed dramatically, her favorite kind of punctuation. You're not thinking about what she deserves. I am, Derek said. She deserves peace, and the freedom to stop apologizing for being herself. They tried to cut him down with questions. How long have you known her? Do you really think a teacher's salary can provide stability? Can you offer her what she's accustomed to? Every word was a disguised insult, a dart tipped with arrogance. Derek didn't raise his voice once. She's accustomed to working for everything she has, he said, not waiting for it to be handed to her, and that's what makes her stronger than any of you realize. Even Melanie went quiet for a moment. The words hung there, heavy, undeniable. Dad recovered first. You sound like a poet. Unfortunately, life isn't poetry. No, Derek said. It's choices, and you've made yours. I heard the rustle of paper. Grandma passing something across the table. We've been talking, she said. We think it's best if you step back, at least until she's better. Step back? Derek repeated slowly. From her? For her own good, Dad said. We'd be willing to compensate you, of course, help you move on. A chair scraped across the floor. I didn't need to see it to know Derek had stood up. You're offering me money to leave the woman I love? Mom's voice dropped to that condescending calm she used with waiters and customer service reps. You're emotional. This is a difficult time. No, he said. This is disgusting. Then Melanie's voice, steady but shaking with fury. You're unbelievable. You're sitting here, plotting how to erase the only person who's ever treated her with real kindness. Mom snapped. We're trying to save her. From what? Melanie demanded. From being happy? She doesn't know what she wants, Dad said. She's always been impulsive. She knows exactly what she wants, Melanie said. She told me herself. Which was? Grandma asked. To stop living her life as a compromise for yours, Melanie said. To finally set boundaries. To stop performing for approval she's never going to get. Yeah. That's not true, Mom whispered, but it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. Melanie wasn't finished. You think you're protecting her, but what you're really protecting is your pride. You did it to Patricia, too. The room went still. Patricia. The name cracked the air like a whip. Mom's voice turned quiet, sharp. What do you know about my sister? I know she didn't abandon you, Melanie said. I know you cut her off because she married someone you didn't approve of. I know she tried to reach out to you for years. That's a lie, Grandma said quickly, but her voice trembled. Melanie's words came slower now, deliberate. She died 3 years ago, alone, and she reached out to Clara before she did. My heart stuttered. It was true. Patricia had found me online, sent me messages full of warmth and apology for a family I'd never met. I'd meant to visit her, but I'd been afraid of my parents finding out, of being cut off like she had been. I'd waited too long. Now everyone in that room knew. Mom sounded small. How do you know that? Because I was there, Melanie said. Clara told me everything. She saved the letters. Patricia wanted to meet her only niece before she died. I never knew, Mom said, voice cracking. She never told us. She didn't have to, Melanie replied. You would have turned her away again. I could hear my mother start to cry, soft, stunned sobs that didn't sound like performance anymore. But Grandma's voice came, cold and cutting. You don't understand. Patricia embarrassed this family. She fell in love, Melanie said, and you buried her for it. The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was hollow, like something vital had been sucked out of the room. The door opened again. Derek's footsteps returned, firmer this time. "Here," he said. "I brought fresh coffee. Thought you could use it." No one thanked him. "Derek," Dad said, choosing the wrong tone entirely, "we need to discuss your relationship with my daughter." He set the cups down. "Go ahead." "This accident has made us realize how fragile life is," Mom said. "We're thinking about what's best for her." "What's best for her?" Derek repeated, as if testing the shape of the phrase. "You mean what's most convenient for you?" "Can you support her?" Grandma asked. "Can you give her the life she deserves?" He smiled, tired and certain. She already has it, because she built it herself. The beeping of the monitor quickened. Even unconscious, my body recognized the sound of someone defending me. "Love doesn't pay the bills," Dad said. "Maybe not," Derek replied, "but it builds homes, and that's more than money ever will." "You're naive," Grandma said. "No," he said. "I'm just not afraid to love without a price tag." Then his voice softened, breaking through the air like light through storm clouds. "When she wakes up, I'm going to tell her I love her. Out loud. In front of all of you, and I'm going to ask her to marry me again, the right way this time. Because she deserves a proposal that celebrates her instead of hiding her." "You already proposed," Ethan said. "I asked her," Derek corrected. "Privately, because I was scared of this, of you, but I'm done being scared." The silence that followed felt sacred. "If we don't approve," Dad asked finally. "Then you'll lose her," Derek said simply. "Not because I'll take her away, but because she'll finally realize she doesn't need your permission to be loved." No one spoke. The monitor beeped softly, in rhythm with something inside me breaking open and rebuilding at the same time. I could feel it in my fingertips, the warmth of choice returning. It was time. Time to wake up. My eyes fluttered open, the fluorescent light stabbing at me. I blinked until the shapes around me came into focus. Derek frozen mid-sentence, Melanie wide-eyed, my family suddenly looking like strangers. "How do you feel?" Derek whispered, moving closer. I looked at all of them, the people who had written my story in their own handwriting, and said clearly, "I feel like I've been unconscious for far too long." The room fell into a silence so sharp it hurt. Every heartbeat sounded louder than the machine's. My mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling like glass about to shatter. "Sweetheart, you've been through a lot," she said. "You're confused. You hit your head." I turned my eyes to her, steady. "I'm not confused. I remember everything." Her mouth opened, closed. She looked toward the doctor's empty doorway like she might call for help. "What do you remember?" my father asked carefully, the same tone he used when he sensed a deal was about to go bad. "I remember swerving to miss a deer," I said. "Not a phone in my hand. I remember the impact. I remember lying in that car while you stood outside talking about how inconvenient this was for your image. I remember you deciding what story to tell the police before the paramedics even reached me." Their faces turned white, only Derek didn't look shocked. He looked proud. "Clara," Grandma said softly, "you're emotional." "No," I interrupted. "I'm clear. Clearer than I've been in years." I lifted my gaze to all of them. "I remember every word you said in this room, too. About paying Derek to leave me. About using my accident as a way to make me see reason. About how love doesn't pay bills. How I'm a complication." Brittany's voice cracked. "You were unconscious." "No, I wasn't," I said. "I was lying there awake for every cruel word." The beeping of my monitor quickened, matching my pulse. Derek squeezed my hand and whispered, "Breathe. I'm right here." Then I looked at him, my anchor in a room of undertow, and I heard you, I said softly. "Every word you said in my defense." His eyes filled instantly. "I meant all of it." "I know." He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "I love you." "I love you too." I turned back to my family, my throat burning. But I've never heard anyone in this family say those words without a condition attached. Mom flinched. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" I asked. "You loved me when I followed the rules. When I majored in what you wanted, dated who you liked, pretended your approval was oxygen. But the second I built a life that didn't make you look good, you called it rebellion." Dad's voice was low, defensive. "We've always wanted what's best for you." "No," I said. "You've wanted what's best for your reflection." Derek didn't speak. He just sat beside me, hands steady in mine, the quiet kind of support that didn't need to perform. "Sweetheart, you have to understand," Grandma started, her tone wobbling between guilt and command. "We were trying to protect you." I stared at her. "Like you protected Aunt Patricia?" The air went out of the room. Mom's head snapped up. You know about Patricia? She whispered. I know everything, I said. That she married someone you didn't approve of, that you cut her off, that she spent years trying to reach you before she died. Mom covered her mouth. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. I was afraid, I said, my voice cracking now. Afraid of becoming her. That's why I didn't meet her before she died. I thought if you found out, you'd disown me too. Melanie's hand brushed my arm gently. You were protecting yourself. I was protecting the idea that you might love me if I just behaved, I said. But that's not love, that's performance. Clara, Dad said, trying to rally control. Your aunt made her bed. No, I cut him off. You buried her in it. No one moved. For the first time, I saw something shift in my mother's face. Something between horror and regret. Patricia was my sister, she whispered. I thought cutting her off would make her change. Instead, it killed her. Derek squeezed my hand tighter. And now you're doing it again, he said gently. Different decade, same mistake. Mom's eyes found his. You defended her tonight, she said quietly. You defended her better than we ever did. Derek's voice was soft but firm. Because she deserves it. Dr. Martinez entered then, carrying my chart, and froze at the tension in the air. Looks like our patient's awake, he said carefully. How are we feeling? Clear, I said again. Good, he said, making notes. Any dizziness? Nausea? No, just a strong desire to go home. He smiled faintly. We'd like to keep you overnight for observation, and psychiatry will stop by in the morning. No need, I said quickly. I'm not suicidal. I swerved to avoid a deer. My family exaggerated to protect their insurance rates. The doctor blinked. Is that true? He asked, looking at my parents. Mom's lips trembled. Dad looked at the floor. Derek spoke up, voice calm but edged with steel. I can show you her call log. She phoned me 20 minutes before the crash. She was happy, excited. Not a trace of depression. You can also contact her employer. They'll confirm she just got a promotion. There's no reason for a psychiatric hold. Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. Understood. He closed the chart with a snap. Then we'll skip the evaluation, but I strongly suggest family counseling. He didn't have to say you'll need it. The room already knew. When he left, the silence grew thick again. I took a long, steady breath. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You can accept me and Derek as we are, celebrate our engagement, respect our choices, or you can continue trying to control us. But if you choose the second option, you lose me, for good. Brittany's jaw dropped. You can't mean that. I absolutely mean it. Mom's voice was small. You're angry right now. I'm finally awake right now. Dad's eyes hardened. You're overreacting. I laughed, short, humorless. That's what you said when I asked to go to art school, when I moved out, when I opened my gallery. Every boundary I've ever set has been labeled an overreaction. Melanie's voice broke through. She's not overreacting. She's surviving. Grandma looked at me, something like sorrow flickering in her eyes. You really think you can cut your family out? If I have to, I said. I watched you cut out your own daughter and live with it. Maybe you can teach me how. That landed like a stone. No one spoke for a long moment. Then, quietly, Mom said, We don't want to lose you. Then stop trying to own me. Tears streamed down her face. I can't change overnight. I don't need overnight, I said softly. I just need you to try. For real. What does that look like? She asked. Boundaries, I said. No criticism about my career. No insults about Derek's job. No lies to doctors or anyone else about my mental health. You want to love me? Learn to respect me. Dad shook his head. That's unreasonable. No, I said. That's what healthy looks like. Derek looked at me like I'd just pulled air into a drowning room. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Visiting hours are over. Only one person can stay tonight. Mom opened her mouth, but Derek spoke first. I'll stay. Dad started to protest, but I cut him off. He stays. No one argued. Not this time. When they filed out, Melanie gave my hand one last squeeze. I'll be back tomorrow, she whispered. You did good. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than I could explain. She nodded toward Derek. You've got someone worth the fight. When she left, the room finally exhaled. Derek sank into the chair beside me, still holding my hand. I meant what I said, he murmured, about proposing again. I want to do it right. I smiled faintly. You already did. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? I was planning to propose to you this weekend, I said. At Rachel's wedding. I tracked down your grandfather's watch, the one your grandmother had to sell. I was going to give it back to you, in front of everyone. He stared at me, stunned. You found that watch? It's in my apartment, I said. In the box with the letter I wrote you. the one where I tell you that you're the first person who ever made me feel like I was enough." He swallowed hard. "Clara." "But that's not happening now," I said gently. "I won't ask you to stand beside people who tried to destroy us." He shook his head, eyes wet. "We'll find another day, another room full of the right people." I nodded, "The ones who love without conditions." He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to mine, and whispered, "I can't wait to see that day." Neither could I. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds, cutting thin gold lines across the sheets. My mother appeared in the doorway, clutching a coffee like it was armor. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. Derek stirred, but I squeezed his hand. "It's okay," I whispered. Mom sat in the same chair she'd occupied the night before. For a long time, she just stared at her hands. "I've been thinking about Patricia," she said finally, "and about you." "What about me?" "I spent my whole life trying to be the daughter my parents wanted. When your aunt rebelled, I thought she was selfish. When she died, I told myself it was her fault for leaving. But sitting here last night, listening to you," her voice broke, "I realized I'm about to make the same mistake that took my sister from me." She looked up, eyes red and raw. "I don't want to lose you too." "Then stop repeating what broke you," I said softly. She nodded slowly. "I don't know how, but I want to learn." "Then start by getting to know me," I said. "Not the version you invented, the real me." She hesitated, then reached into her purse. "There's something you should have." She handed me a bundle of yellowed envelopes. "Patricia's letters. I never opened them, but I couldn't throw them away." I ran my fingers over the familiar handwriting, my throat tightening. "She wrote about you," Mom said. "Said she followed your work, that she was proud of you, called you the daughter she never had." Tears filled my eyes. She would have loved Derek. "She would have," Mom agreed. "Maybe it's time I learned to love him too." For the first time in years, I saw her, not as the enforcer of expectations, but as a woman who'd been living inside the same cage, just longer. When Derek and I were discharged, the air outside the hospital smelled new, like rain and promise. As we walked toward the car, my phone buzzed. "Dad, your mother talked to us. We want to do better. Can we start over?" I showed Derek the message. He smiled carefully. "What do you think?" "I think people can change," I said, "but I also think actions matter more than words." He nodded. "Then let's see what they do." I smiled. "We'll give them a chance. One, no more." He wrapped his arm around me as we stepped into the sunlight. "Deal," he said. And for the first time, the road ahead didn't feel like escape. It felt like home. 3 months later, the air smelled like spring and second chances. Derek and I stood beneath an archway of blooming jasmine at the Botanical Gardens, the same place we'd had our first date, back when everything still felt like possibility instead of survival. I'd chosen this spot deliberately, not for the photos, for the symbolism. New growth rising out of a place that had almost burned. Our wedding was small, no chandeliers, no string quartet, just sunlight, a handful of chairs, and the people who had actually earned the right to witness our lives. Melanie stood beside me as maid of honor, fierce and beaming, her speech tucked into a notebook that I knew would make everyone cry. Derek's colleagues from the school sat in the second row, laughing easily, comfortable in their thrift store suits. My parents sat quietly in the front, not because they'd been forgiven yet, but because they were still showing up to prove that they wanted to be. Even Rachel was here, sitting with the twins, her usual composure replaced by something softer. A few weeks after I left the hospital, she'd shown up at my gallery with a bouquet of sunflowers and an apology that sounded like relief. "I watched the footage from that night," she'd said. "I realized I became mom the second I got engaged. I thought tradition meant safety. It doesn't." I'd hugged her, not because the past was gone, but because she finally saw it. The ceremony was simple. Derek looked at me like I was a miracle he didn't deserve, and I looked at him like he was the home I'd spent my whole life trying to find. When it was time to exchange vows, he reached into his pocket. "Clara," he said, voice shaking just enough to make everyone lean forward, "you've already given me everything. Your patience, your stubborn heart, the way you always see beauty in things most people ignore. You made me believe that love isn't about possession, it's about recognition." I smiled through tears. "You taught me that I don't have to earn love by performing for it. You love me without conditions, something I didn't know was possible until you." He slipped the ring onto my finger. I placed my hand over his and whispered, "Thank you for fighting for me when I didn't know how to fight for myself." "And thank you," he whispered back, "for waking up." Later, during the reception under the white canopy, Melanie clinked her glass for attention. If I could give one toast, she said, it's to the woman who learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're doors, and to the man who had the good sense to knock before walking through one. Laughter filled the garden. Even my parents smiled. When it was Dad's turn to speak, he stood awkwardly, clearing his throat like a man unused to sincerity. We didn't deserve to be invited, he began, but we're grateful. Your mother and I, we're learning. We see now that loving our children means letting them build lives we don't control. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't poetic, but it was real. After the toasts, Mom found me by the fountain, the same place where Derek and I had first kissed. I read all of Patricia's letters, she said quietly. And? I asked. I cried through most of them, she admitted. She was braver than I ever was. You remind me of her. She just wanted to be loved, I said. Mom nodded. We all do. I just went about it the wrong way. She looked up, meeting my eyes. Can you forgive me? I hesitated, then said the truth. Not yet, but I'm willing to try. She smiled, watery but genuine. That's more than I deserve. Maybe, I said, but it's enough for now. Weeks turned into months. I threw myself back into my gallery work, my photographs selling faster than I could frame them. Every picture I took after the accident looked different, warmer, somehow alive. It was like learning to see again. Derek and I started volunteering together at the community center on weekends. He taught creative writing to the kids. I taught photography. Watching him talk to them, eyes bright, sleeves rolled up, reminded me of why I fell in love with him in the first place. He saw the world as something you could heal by teaching people to look at it differently. We built a small apartment filled with secondhand furniture and light. Nothing matched, but everything meant something. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd read Aunt Patricia's letters out loud. In one, she'd written, "If love requires permission, it isn't love, it's approval in disguise. Don't confuse the two, my dear." That sentence became a mantra. One Sunday afternoon, we invited my parents over for dinner. I cooked, they brought dessert. It was the first time they'd been in our home since everything had fallen apart. Mom walked through the door, holding a lemon pie, and stopped to look around. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It feels like you." "Thank you," I said. And for once, I didn't feel the need to apologize for my choices. During dinner, the conversation stayed polite, safe, until Dad set down his fork and said, "I've been thinking about Patricia." Mom froze. He continued anyway. "I never met her husband, but I used to tell myself he must have been wrong for her. Now I realize maybe I was wrong." Mom reached for his hand under the table. It was small, but it was something. A few months later, we got a letter from Grandma. Not a call, not a visit, just a card that said, "I hope you're happy." No apology, no affection, just a sentence that tried to sound like well wishes but felt like surrender. Derek looked at it and said, "That's her version of peace." "Maybe," I said, sliding the card into a drawer, "but this time I'm not chasing it." He smiled, pulling me close. Good. At the gallery opening for my new exhibit, After Impact, I stood in front of a photograph that had been taken just weeks after the accident. It showed the wreckage of my car, sunlight breaking through the shattered glass, refracted like a prism. I'd titled it Beginning. When the crowd cleared, Mom walked up beside me. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's what almost killed me," I said. "And what saved you," she replied. I turned to her, surprised. "You think so?" She nodded. "Some crashes break you, others wake you up." For the first time, I believe she meant it. That night, when we got home, I opened a box I kept on the shelf in my studio. Inside were Patricia's letters, a few photographs, and the hospital bracelet I'd never thrown away. I added Grandma's card to the pile, not out of bitterness, but as a record of everything that had led me here. Derek came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am," I said, "even after everything." He kissed the top of my head. "You turned pain into purpose. Not many people can do that." I smiled, closing the box. I just stopped trying to be loved the wrong way. Later, lying in bed, I thought about all of it. The accident, the lies, the noise of sirens and heart monitors, the words I'd finally said aloud. And I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes you have to crash to see who runs toward the wreckage and who worries about the insurance. And sometimes the people who run are enough to rebuild your whole world. I turned toward Derek, his face soft in the moonlight. He stirred, half asleep, murmuring, "You okay?" "Better than okay," I whispered. "I'm home." He smiled without opening his eyes. "Then let's stay here a while." And we did. A year later, I stood on the balcony of our small apartment, a mug of coffee warming my hands, as morning light spilled over the city. It had been 12 months since the accident, but sometimes I could still hear the sound of metal twisting, smell the smoke in the cold air. Only now, those memories didn't tighten my chest. They reminded me how far I'd come. Derek slid open the door behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You've been staring at the same skyline for 10 minutes, he said sleepily. "I'm thinking," I said. "Dangerous habit," he teased. "What about?" "About how 1 year ago I thought my life had fallen apart," I said. "But maybe it was just unfolding." He kissed the back of my neck. "Unfolding into this?" I smiled. "Exactly this." The knock on our door came later that afternoon. When I opened it, my mother was standing there, holding an envelope and wearing the same uncertain expression I used to wear before showing her my report cards. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded, stepping aside. "Of course." She handed me the envelope. "It's from your father," she said. "He's not ready to face you yet, but he wanted you to have this." Inside was a single handwritten note. "Clara, I watched your exhibit on the news. You looked happy. I hope it's real this time. I'm proud of you, even if I don't understand you. Dad." It was short, almost clumsy, but it was something. After all the control, all the silence, even those awkward words felt like progress. "I think he means it," Mom said softly. "I think he's trying," I replied, "and that's enough." We sat on the couch for a while, awkward at first, until she looked around and smiled. "You really made this place your own." "I had to," I said. "I couldn't live in anyone else's story anymore." She nodded slowly. "You were right, about everything. Love isn't control, it's trust." Her eyes glistened. "I spent my whole life mistaking one for the other." I reached for her hand. "Then you get to start over too." For a moment, we sat there quietly, two women trying to unlearn generations of damage. The next day, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a small wooden box wrapped in a familiar floral handkerchief. My heart clenched. It was Grandma's. Derek unfolded the note on top. "Clara, I'm old, and I don't apologize easily. But maybe I should have looked harder at my own reflection before judging yours. I hope you find the happiness I never let myself have. You were right to walk away. That's how the cycle ends." Underneath the note was the delicate silver locket Grandma always wore. Inside, she'd placed a photograph of her, my mother, and Aunt Patricia, taken before the family fractures began. I hadn't even known it existed. "She sent it?" Derek asked quietly. I nodded, throat tight. "Maybe this is her way of saying sorry." "Maybe it's her way of saying goodbye," he said gently. I turned the locket over in my hands, the metal cool against my skin. Either way, it's closure. Later that week, Melanie dropped by with takeout and the same mischievous grin she'd had since college. "So, Mrs. Patterson," she said, winking at Derek, "how's married life?" "Still shocking that I get to keep him," I said, laughing. Derek set the table while Melanie opened the cartons. She said, "I've been thinking about that night at the hospital. You standing up to them. It didn't just change you, it changed me too." "How so?" I asked. "I realize we spend too much of our lives trying to edit ourselves for people who'll never read the story right anyway," she said. "You stopped doing that. It gave the rest of us permission to try." I smiled. "Guess we're all learning how to live unedited." "To unedited lives," she said, raising her cup. "To unedited lives," Derek echoed. That summer, I hosted my second solo exhibit, this one called The Recovery Project. Each photograph captured small acts of healing. Hands holding, windows open to rain, broken pottery stitched together with gold. I hung one photo near the entrance, a self-portrait taken in the reflection of a hospital window, half my face covered in bandages, the other half lit by sunrise. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Sometimes you have to shatter to see what you're made of." People cried when they saw it, but the tears weren't sad. They were recognition. Mom came to that show, too. She stood quietly in front of the portrait for a long time, then whispered, "You really are Patricia's niece." I smiled. "Maybe I'm yours, too." She turned and hugged me, her grip trembling but real. "Maybe you are." As the months passed, forgiveness stopped feeling like surrender and started feeling like freedom. My parents visited for dinner once a month now, never unannounced, always respectful. Dad would bring his awkward compliments about my work, Mom would bring dessert, and Derek would pour coffee for everyone like peace offerings in mugs. We didn't talk about the accident anymore. We didn't need to. Sometimes, though, when the light hit a certain way, I'd remember the moment before the crash. The deer, the headlights, the sound of the world collapsing, and I'd whisper a thank you under my breath. Not to fate, to survival. On the anniversary of the accident, Derek surprised me with a drive into the hills. The road twisted beneath a canopy of trees, green and alive. When we stopped, I realized where we were, the spot where my car had hit the oak. The bark still bore the faint scar of impact. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. I had it repaired, he said, smiling. Inside was his grandfather's watch, the one I'd tracked down before everything fell apart. Now it's engraved, he added, turning it over. On the back were 3 words: love, survive, begin. I covered my mouth, tears flooding my eyes. You kept it. Of course, he said softly. You brought it back to me once. I figured it should remind us both what came after. We stood there under the same tree that had almost ended everything. But instead of wreckage, there was life. Birds nesting in the branches, sunlight filtering through leaves, the sound of our laughter echoing off the hill. Sometimes love doesn't fix the past. It just builds something better on top of it. 5 years later, we had a daughter. We named her Patricia. When Mom held her for the first time, she whispered through tears, "She has your strength." "No," I said, smiling. "She has ours." Now, the empty box from that night sits on a shelf in my studio, beside the locket and a photo of Aunt Patricia. Inside, I've placed a note written in my own handwriting. This is what healing looks like. Sometimes I open it before bed, not to relive the pain, but to remind myself how it ended, with truth, with boundaries, with love that didn't need permission. I used to think the accident ruined my life. Now I know it revealed it. Because sometimes the crash isn't the end. It's the sound of the cage breaking open. And when you finally climb out of the wreckage, you don't go back to who you were. You become who you were always meant to be.